at the museum today, I thought we'd be making master copies.
That was the plan, but then I started thinking, do you know how people get offended by art all the time? I thought, what's offending me the most? And then I decided to paint fig leaves on top, like Adam and Eve. I'll be done in 1 second.
Those are elbows. Elbows. On a real Picasso masterpiece.
I'm deeply offended by elbows. No one should have to look at them. The curators will thank me.
Thank you for what? Helping Picasso finish his painting?
You'll see. And while on the subject, I'm not a big fan of knees either. I'm gonna need more fig leaves.
That's it. We have to get out of here. But first I'm writing a note saying we're sorry for this. Sorry. I'm out of here.
I'm not even halfway there.
Do you hear that? The curators are coming to thank you.
Stop right there. Put your brushes down.
Oh wow, you really seem offended. Would you like a fig leaf?
Welcome to Art Adventures. I'm Elizabeth Whelan.
And I'm Adriana and Eftimie, and today we're talking about offensive art. We've talked about art theft, art forgery, money laundering, and many other offensive subjects. What better way to finish the season than with offensive art? Elizabeth, are you offended?
Not yet.
We'll see. I'll ask you again later. So, how can art, such a wonderful subject, offend people?
Well, there have been some historic and histrionic culture clashes in art, from folks deciding that any nude bit of the body is offensive to art that is genuinely disturbing, or art that is considered excessive, like the super fancy decoration of Rococo. And an example of that style of art is hanging right behind us, this kind of crazy looking thing. Jean-Auré Fragonard painted this in 1767, and the sheer frivolity of the style. Note the little satin slipper being kicked into the air. It really got on some people's nerves, to say nothing of the positioning of the guy lying in the shrubbery who can kind of get a view up her skirt. This was not the solemn religious painting of yore, so this kind of thing was definitely considered offensive. And art can be considered offensive for several reasons. First and foremost, art often reflects the opinions and beliefs of the artist, which may or may not align with those of the viewer. This can lead to a clash of ideas and a sense of discomfort or offense. Art can portray graphic or explicit content that some people find disturbing or inappropriate. This can include nudity, violence, profanity, or depictions of the reality of war. The ability of art to capture the gamut of human existence can be unsettling. So furthermore, art that pushes boundaries of what can be considered acceptable can be seen as offensive to some people. So this may include art that tackles issues like race, gender, sexuality, or religion. Ultimately, what is considered offensive really does vary from person to person. One person might find a statue to be offensive, while others may view it as like thought-provoking or even inspirational. So you can see how this could become a real problem. So Adriana, I heard that people painted fig leaves on art they considered offensive. Can you tell me more about that?
Yes, Elizabeth. The renowned fig leaf campaign, one of the most significant acts of art censorship, the one that gave many artists headaches. Let's start with the origins. The original concept of fig leaves covering nudity comes from the biblical story of Adam and Eve. Shamed by their nudity after eating from the tree of knowledge, they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. Because of this, fig leaves are associated with modesty, covering up embarrassment or shame. It wasn't until 1563 when the Catholic Church and the Vatican realized they were offended by the nudity found in art. Took them a while to realize that, but then they decided to bring back the fig leaves. According to them, they wanted to avoid offending women and children. After the Pope's order, in the Vatican Museum, all male statues from ancient Greece and Rome either had their male parts covered by a fig leaf or they were just cut off.
Oh my goodness.
Don't worry.
That's a little extreme.
Don't worry, Elizabeth. They didn't throw them away. Somewhere in the Vatican Museum, there are hundreds of male parts stored in boxes. That's not a nice image for a Vatican. Some museums and galleries confirmed, and are you offended yet?
Not yet.
Okay, good.
But I'm fascinated. This is crazy.
It sounds crazy to me too. Some museums and galleries conformed and cover up nude sculptures and paintings with strategically placed fig leaves, drapery, or other type of clothing. The famous sculpture of Michelangelo named David was given a marble fig leaf in the early 16th century, but it was later removed in 1912. It was actually on and off quite a lot, depending where the sculpture was shown and if those kind of people were offended or not.
That is hilarious.
Yep. Many museums have removed the fig leaves from their artworks, allowing the public to view them as originally intended by artists, plus some leftover holes. Today, the fig leaf campaign is no longer in use, but explicit art is still subject to censorship and controversy in some cases. Elizabeth,
Yes?
is there any particular thing that offends you the most in the art world?
Well, let me get my fig leaf ready. I'm not easily offended by art. I really do feel that artists have the right to paint and sculpt whatever they want. But I have to say that when something's just gratuitously pornographic or gratuitously violent just for the shock factor, that does make me roll my eyes. I mean, I wouldn't make the artist stop. I wouldn't cover it up with a fig leaf. But I mean, I wonder just how much value does that art really have after the shock has worn off? So I feel like an artist is free to create the work and I'm free to dislike it. And this is sort of part of the message, I think, of some of the things that we've been showing everybody during this series, is that it's okay for everyone to have an opinion. They don't all have to agree. Well, what do you think?
I do have to say I agree with you, Elizabeth, and I'll tell you more about what offends me a little bit later. I have a really good story for you.
I'm very interested.
During the centuries, people have called different types of art movements offensive. How is that possible, an entire art movement?
There's no lack of things to get offended by. Some people seem to make a habit of finding things that offend them. And this has been going on through time. This isn't just a contemporary problem. So take Impressionist art, for example. Folks tend to love it today. The light, the colors, the brushwork. It's really sort of free and people think of it as lovely. But the unconventional techniques and subject matter of Impressionist painters like Claude Monet and Edouard Manet were initially considered offensive by traditional art critics. And so here's Manet's Luncheon on the Grass. It's also known as a Déjeuner sur l'herbe, which got people into a tizzy. And it wasn't just because of the nude woman and the other guys wearing their clothes, which is rather obvious. But the critics got upset that Manet used people who he knew to pose for the portraits. The nude woman is sort of a combination of both his wife and one of his other female models, and the men are Manet's brother and his brother-in-law. But it got tongues wagging also because it displayed a really taboo subject, and that was the rampant prostitution that Paris was experiencing at that time. You weren't supposed to talk about it, never mind paint a huge painting on the subject. So this painting in real life, unframed, is about 7 foot by 8.5 foot.
Oh, wow.
You can't miss it. So abstract art, that's another movement that gets people's backs up for various different reasons. Artists like Jackson Pollock and Willem de Kooning, they faced criticism for their abstract and non-representational artworks, which some found offensive for their perceived lack of skill or meaning. And it's the idea that art could be done quickly. That kind of went against the grain, seemingly without any kind of standard of quality. It really irritated some people, and it still does. In the late 1940s, when abstract expressionism took over from the Paris-based modernism of artists like Picasso, it really changed the trajectory of art. And with those changes came a lot of complaining. Joan Mitchell was one of those abstract expressionist artists that stirred up the easily offended. Not only was she a premier abstract painter, better than most of the men painting alongside her at that time, she was also from a well-off family, which goes against the starving artist trope. And then she moved to Paris to have a relationship with a French-Canadian race car driver who was also an artist. This really got on people's nerves. The romance of it escaped many, who simply found a reason to be offended, mostly because she had left for France just as the power base of art had swung from Paris to New York. And even worse, she stayed in France. Her subsequently tumultuous personal life also created more opportunities to dismiss a woman who is now seen as a preeminent abstract artist. And she's actually a favorite artist of mine. I really
Mine
like her
too.
work. So these examples demonstrate how perceptions of offensive art can really vary greatly. It depends on cultural, social, historical context. Art and the artists themselves are often challenging norms, which can lead to different opinions on what is considered offensive or thought-provoking. So, what happens to art that people deem offensive?
Well, as you said, art is subjective. And what one person finds offensive, another one may see as thought-provoking or meaningful. Offensive art often sparks controversy and public debate about its merits, meaning, and impact on society, which can lead to increased visibility and attention for the artwork. In contemporary art, artists use this to their advantage. Some artists use an offensive subject intentionally in their artwork to gain attention. All publicity is good publicity, they said.
Yeah.
Offended individuals and groups may organize protests or boycott the artist, the institution displaying the art, or the sponsors involved. In some cases, authorities or institutions may take measures to remove the artwork from public view, canceling exhibitions, applying age restrictions, or adding fig leaves. If an artwork is considered offensive or potentially illegal, this can result in fines or even criminal charges.
Wow.
Over time, the perception of offensive art can change. What was once considered offensive may be reevaluated and appreciated in a different light, especially as societal norms and values evolve. Like Sargent's Madame X once was critiqued and rejected, but now is highly appreciated. I'll tell you more about that later.
Oh, good, great.
Have there ever been fights over art that was considered offensive?
There have. I mean, if people can get offended, there will be
They will.
fisticuffs. Somebody will fight about it. Yes, there have definitely been instances where art considered offensive has led to physical fights, altercations, or, as we've talked about before, acts of vandalism due to strong reactions from individuals or groups who found the art highly objectionable. Here are a couple of notable examples. So actually, I wanted to start with a music example, which I know that's not about art, but I just wanted to throw it in because I thought this was really interesting. People will get offended at all sorts of things. And when Igor Stravinsky's ballet, The Rite of Spring, was first premiered, it caused a riot during that premiere in Paris. The avant-garde music and choreography were so unconventional that it incited outrage in the audience, resulting in shouting, fistfights, and a police intervention at a ballet. So,
wow.
Yeah. I mean, it isn't just that paintings and such, but an excellent example of an art show that brought on strong emotion was Charles Saatchi's Sensation exhibition in 1997. It was first exhibited at the Royal Academy in London, showing works from his own collection, including provocative works by artists like Damien Hirst, Jenny Saville, Sarah Lucas, and Chris O'Feely, all of whom were making art that pushed the boundaries in terms of subject matter and taste. So O'Feely's painting, The Holy Virgin Mary, incorporated elephant dung, and the cherubs surrounding her are made up from images of women's buttocks, clipped from pornographic magazines. So we can't even show that to you today.
There are so many things we can show you today.
Right. You'll just have to trust us. This painting by itself sparked particularly strong protests and physical altercations at the museum. The Museum of Modern Art actually owns this work now, but it's not on view at this time because I wanted to see.
Wondering why.
I wonder why, yeah. And then we have Mark Quinn. He did a work in this same show that was a self-portrait in the form of a frozen head made from pints of his own blood.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
right.
Disturbing.
So much of the art in this show was considered debased, debauched, and upsetting. The show attracted, of course, Hundreds of thousands of people, inspired protests, resignations, and strongly worded tabloid columns.
Resignations?
Yeah, people, it went on and on. And I mean, there's a lot, we could do a whole show on that show.
We should do
There's
that.
so much about that. And the offending nature of the show didn't diminish once it started traveling. In 1999, then Mayor Rudy Giuliani tried to shut down the show when it came to the Brooklyn Museum in New York. So all of these kinds of incidents illustrate how strongly people can react when their cultural, religious, or moral sensibilities are challenged. People don't like change. Art has the power to provoke intense emotions and responses, positive and negative, and this is occasionally escalated to the point of physical confrontation or vandalism. So can you tell me, Adriana, about paintings or statues that were covered up due to censorship?
Yes, Elizabeth, the famous mural in the Sistine Chapel in Vatican, The Last Judgment by Michelangelo, was altered.
Really?
Yes, Michelangelo's depiction of nude figures raised objections from church officials during the Fig Leaf campaign. So many things happened during the Fig Leaf campaign.
Right.
In response, artist Daniel de Volterra was commissioned to add drapery over some of the nudes.
Wow.
So now if you're going to the chapel, you can see everything is covered. Well, you can see much.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
Starting with the 20th century, people started to loosen up a little bit, and artists got the memo that some artwork might be considered offensive, and then they tried to use this to their advantage. So we don't have as much cover-ups as we had in the 16th century. But then we have one of the most scandalous paintings, Olympia by Edouard Manet, featuring a confident nude woman who is waiting for her client. The painting shocked because there are several details in the pictures that identify her as a lady of the evening, I shall say. The painting's subject matter raised issues about the role of women and infuriated art critics. It faced censorship and it was temporarily removed from the public view. Even though Olympia offended many viewers, artists got each other's back, and in 1874, Paul Cézanne painted a modern Olympia, a homage to Manet's painting. What do you think the reaction was? Well, you guessed, it was the same. Everyone got offended by the painting. Are you offended by this painting, Elizabeth?
No, I'm not, but I think it's really interesting how much life that painting has had in the theme, because I have now seen it reproduced with men in those positions, with people of different color in the positions. I'm sure there'll be a Martian in there one day.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah, it's really quite incredible. Oh, and I have some to add to this list. Some of the paintings that were offensive, it boggles the mind. So this one, The Birth of Venus, I was really taken aback. This is by Sandro Botticelli. It was painted in the 15th century, and it's an iconic Renaissance painting, but it was considered very risque for its time. In the 19th century, it was even removed from public view and kept in a private collection to avoid causing offense. And this is an interesting story here. So this painting here is the lictors bring to Brutus the bodies of his sons, and it's painted by Jacques-Louis David in the 1700s. This neoclassical painting depicting a grieving father was temporarily removed from public display during the French Revolution because it was seen as politically sensitive. The subject is the Roman leader Lucius Junius Brutus, the founder of the Roman Republic, and he's contemplating the fate of his sons. They had conspired to overthrow the Republic and restore the monarchy. Brutus himself was compelled to order their deaths. In doing so, Brutus became the heroic defender of the Republic at the cost of his own family. Its themes of virtue, sacrifice, and devotion to the nation sparked much controversy when it was unveiled in the politically charged era of the French Revolution. So it's really quite incredible how people can view a painting. So these examples demonstrate how societal norms and values and political ideologies can lead to the censorship or covering up of art. It really shows how the attitudes change over time. So Adriana, in your opinion, what is the silliest case of censorship with an artwork over the centuries?
Elizabeth, the silliest one will have to do with John Singer Sargent's painting Madame X that I mentioned about earlier.
Yes.
This painting is surrounded by controversy. It offended many viewers and critics at the time, and the reason is quite foolish. Well, for nowadays. This is a portrait of a young woman painted not as a commission, but at the request of Sargent. It was first exhibited at the Paris Salon in 1884. In the original version of this portrait, the right strap of the dress was shown to have slipped off her shoulder.
Shocking.
Shocking. Critics have called the painting offensive, being scandalized by the model's nearly bare shoulders and the gown's plunging neckline.
Oh my goodness.
It was considered too provocative for the time and started a scandal that affected both the artist and the model. Sargent even left the country afterwards, and Madame X, who was Madame Gautreau, lost respect in the eyes of society.
Wow.
It was a very big scandal. At the close of the exhibit, Sargent repainted her shoulder strap and kept the painting in his studio. He declined to exhibit or display it publicly for more than 20 years.
Wow.
The funny part is that there are numerous nudes painted before Sargent, which many critics appreciated.
Right, right.
But somehow a strap slip off the shoulder was too offensive for them.
That is crazy.
It's okay. In 1916, Sargent sold Madame X to the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art in New York. By this point, the painting scandal had become a major selling point.
I bet it had.
So he turned that around.
Yeah. So is there artwork that you think should be offensive but was received positively?
Yes, Elizabeth. This one offends me.
Okay, oh, I want to hear.
Well, this is considered an anti-artwork, but somehow was received so well it offends me. Let me explain. In 1961, Piero Manzoni, an Italian artist, reportedly filled 90 cans with his own waste matter.
Oh my gosh.
And labeled them.
offended.
You are? Yes, finally I did it. Well, he did it. So he filled 90 cans with his own waste matter and labeled them artists.
Oh my goodness.
Collectors began buying the cans, and they soon fetched high prices at auction. One of the cans was sold for 275,000 euro.
Wow.
It's not known 100% if the contents are authentic, because the cans are steel and cannot be x-rayed or scanned to determine the contents.
Oh.
And opening a can would cause it to lose its value. Oh, what a loss.
Well, that's a really great piece of artwork to end our examples on, isn't it? When Adriana and I started this series, one of the things that we wanted to do was to make sure that we were sharing a lot of examples with you and ideas and our own opinions so that you can have your opinions as well on these topics. Everyone doesn't have to be an expert to go to a museum and enjoy what they see, but you can become more expert. You can develop your expertise over time. And part of it is just finding some of these crazy stories that we've been sharing with you.
It's so much fun when
It
these
really
these crazy stories are in front of us. It's impossible to ignore.
Right.
So thank you for joining us in our art adventures. We opened the door to art forgeries, gave some good pointers on how thieves are stealing art, talked about how to launder money. I think we painted a nice picture of the art world, right?
We sure learned a lot for this show, and I hope you have as well.
And check out our website, artadventures-tv.com, where you can find all the artwork we talked about during our 12 episodes. You can find links to articles, you can find book and movie recommendations.
Including some of the artwork that was too offensive for us to show today.
Whew, that was spicy.
Thanks for joining us, and until next time, bye-bye.
Next time, stay curious. How art.
Okay, how about that? Okay.
Elizabeth? I'll be done now.
No, we never put the mic back.
That one doesn't have the red button on. Is it recording?
This one is not recording. Is that one recording? Oh my
I think
God.
so, but that was a really important one.
I'm sure this happens to big directors as well.
I'm sure they get fired right after. I get the chance to look better now.
Adriana!
Elizabeth?
Oh my God! We just had to get through this one.
I'm okay.
Yep. trying to be serious over here. Adriana,
Elizabeth?
when you okay, we're gonna do that again. All right. Adriana,
Elizabeth?
when you okay.
No,
No, okay.
I need a sip of water.
Okay.